The best part about being a writer is being able to create diverse characters from all walks of life. But how do you do that effectively? How do you create a character who's so different from you that you don't really know where to start? We're going to talk about that today.
You have a story to tell, but you don't know where to start. Let me show you how to free your story. I teach you how to write and how to dig deep in your soul to release your story and make a difference in the world.
Welcome to the Julia Monte channel. If we're just meeting, I am Julia Monte. I'm a women's fiction author and always here on Fridays to give you some writing tips. Okay, so let's talk about creating diverse characters, especially characters who are of a different race or ethnicity than what you are, because that can be a challenge. And we also want to be able to create these characters with sensitivity. So I'm going to go back for a minute, back to 1998, when I first sold my first novel. And even before that, okay, so I went to a writer's conference, and there was going to be a new line of romances which was going to feature Latino characters. I was very excited about this because I got to write something that I knew about, right? So people are always saying, write what you know. Well, I know Latinos, I know the Latino culture, and I'm part of the Latino culture, so I figured I could write a good novel featuring my background and be able to share that with other people. Okay, so it was great. The one thing that the editor, when was at this conference, said to the people that were there was that they were looking for Latino authors to write these Latino romances. And she got a lot of attention that she didn't want for saying this. So people were saying, well, what do you mean? Why can't, why can't somebody of a different ethnicity write Latino characters? What difference does it make? We are all writers. And so the reason a lot of non-Latinos were not happy about this was because as writers, we are supposed to be able to write diverse characters, right? We're supposed to be able to write whatever character needs to be in the story. We don't have to be, for example, a 15-year-old to be able to write a 15-year-old character or write a YA novel, right? We don't have to be a doctor in order to be able to write a character who is a doctor. So they said, well, what's the difference here? Why do I have to be a Latino? Why does that have to be my background in order to be able to write a character who is Latino? It just didn't make sense to people. So, what do you think? Does that make sense? Is it logical, right? That we have to belong to, be, a member of a certain group in order to be able to write effectively and to be able to write authentically from that background. Well, and since I'm here to tell you what I think, I'm going to tell you how I feel about this. Okay, so what I do believe is that it's not easy for us to put ourselves into anybody else's shoes, right? It's very difficult for us to be able to truly understand what another person feels. However, I do believe that we as writers have the responsibility of doing the research so that we know what we're talking about. If we do that, we should be able to portray a character of any race, of any ethnicity, of any age, right, appropriately and correctly. Can we get it completely wrong and offend people that we are trying to actually write positively about? Of course we can, because we are human and we can get it wrong. So there are certain things that we want to do to make sure that we get it as right as we can, right? So that's what I want to discuss today, is what is it that you can do as a writer to add diverse characters, because you want to do that. At least I want to do that. I like to have a diversity of characters. I mostly have Latino characters in my stories, but life isn't like that, right? We don't all, life is not all white people, all Latino characters, all black people, right? It just isn't like that. There's a mixture of us, and that's what makes life nice. That's what makes it interesting and realistic to have a story where there's a mixture of people, of ages and races and everything. Okay, so then your first thing that you want to do is really make sure that you understand what you're talking about. Okay, so do your research, understand that group completely. So understand their history, understand the culture, understand other things, right? Read what is their literature, what things have they written about in the past, and that will tell you maybe a little bit of what's important to them in their culture, what they've been affected by. If you read like actual literature or poetry or something from a culture, you can learn a lot about what they feel, what they've gone through. So educate yourself, right, so that you understand what you're writing about, who you're writing about. And it doesn't have to be all through books, right? It can be part of the research, can be actually talking to people. Maybe I live in California. It's a very diverse state, right? There's people of all cultures, of all races, from many different countries, from many states. So there's an opportunity to be able to talk to people, or maybe to live in an area that might be a little different than what you grew up in, and then you get to be exposed to that culture, right? There's nothing better than actually than going to, not that I'm suggesting this, but if you've ever done this, if you've ever gone like to a different country and you've been there and you've been immersed in that culture, right, or in that country, you pick up a lot just from being there. You start to understand the way that they phrase things, or the way that they think about things, or just little tiny things that are unique to that group. I remember when I went to Argentina with my husband, who is not Argentine, and just one thing that I never even thought about is, like, when we were walking down the street, there were parked cars, and some parked cars had a bottle of water on top of the car, and I really didn't pay attention to that, which I should have. They're details that are important. But my husband thought, well, that's weird. Like, why do they do that? I'm like, I don't really know why they do that. And so we asked my uncle, and he explained that those were the cars that people wanted to sell. It's like, wow, so they just put a bottle of water on top of the car. Well, that's interesting, right? It's a little subculture thing that would make it authentic if you were visiting there and you added that there. I don't know, right? But it's just these little things that if you live there, if you experience something, you can write more authentically, even if you are not part of that group. And you might notice things that they wouldn't even notice, right? Because they're so used to seeing that. But you, as an outsider, will notice things that they just take for granted. So, you don't have to move to a different country. You don't have to do that, but definitely do your research so that you can write authentically, that you can write and observe things that are part of that group. Okay, something else that you want to remember is that there will be generational differences. So just because somebody is part of a certain ethnic group, it doesn't mean that everybody in that ethnic group, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a second, but it doesn't mean that everybody in that group believes the same thing, has the same thoughts, has the same history, right? So generational differences do exist, and somebody who is younger might have a different experience in this country, right? If somebody has immigrated here, as a young person, grew up here, had kids, they had a completely different experience than their children and grandchildren will have. So just kind of keep that in mind, that when you are writing about a group, it's going to be different depending on their age, depending on what they've experienced and how they've grown up. Okay, and probably the most important, this isn't the last thing that I'm going to say, but it is probably, I think, the most important, is that you should remember that you are writing a story, that you're writing about a character, that you're not writing about an ethnic group. You're not writing a story about that ethnicity or that race or that group. It doesn't have to be racial. It could be anything, any other group that you are not a part of. You're not writing about the group. You're just saying this person happens to be Black. This person happens to be whatever. And you want to portray that person accurately and sensitively. However, you're not writing about that, right? You're writing a story, right? So maybe there's a Black police officer, or there's a Black doctor. And this doctor has whatever the story is about, right? that's what the story's about. Maybe he falls in love. Maybe, it depends on the type of story it is. But that's what you're writing about. So don't get hung up on, including everything or everything that person might eat with their family. Or I mean, you can put some of that stuff in there. It creates maybe a little authenticity. But that's not what you're writing about. You're writing a story, and that's the most important thing to remember. Okay, and lastly, have a good reason on why you want to include this character. Why do you want to have a character of a different ethnicity or a certain group? And I'm using race and ethnicity because it's the easiest to talk about. But again, it could be anything, right? It could be age, it could be sexual orientation, it could be whatever, group that you don't belong to that you want to write about. So why do you want to do that? Why do you want to have this character? Why does it have to be a character of this ethnicity or race or whatever? So have a good reason, because just to randomly throw somebody in there, throw people in there, is not a good idea. It's like, well, you know what, it just feels inauthentic. It feels like you're just tossing people in, maybe just to, seem politically correct or whatever. You don't want to do that. You want to really be authentic to your story. Why do you want to have some? I mean, I like to have, like I mentioned, a diverse group because that just to me reflects society. It reflects the society that I live in, and I like to have that. But I mostly do have Latino characters in my stories. And again, that's because I feel more comfortable with that, or Anglo characters, because again, I'm more comfortable. I know the culture. I live in the culture, so it's easier for me to write. So I'm choosing what is the easiest for me, and I'm choosing what I don't have to do a lot of research for because I already know the culture. I'm also choosing it because it's just what I want to write. I want to write mostly Latino characters. So, that's me. But if I was going to choose a culture or a group that I wasn't familiar with, I would do what I'm saying here. I would spend the time to do the research, to really investigate, maybe to ask questions. One of the other things you can do is have people read your work. So have somebody from that group read your work and share their perspectives. Like, okay, I think that you're kind of getting this wrong, or I think that this person would say something this way, right? So it helps you. So some people call it like sensitivity readers. So if that's helpful to you, then that's what you should do. And it helps. To me, it would help because it would I would get one perspective. Again, it's just one person from that group. That person may or may not represent everybody in the group, but I figure they would probably know more than I would, right? So let's say I'm writing Asian characters. I don't know enough about that group, so I would ask somebody who is part of that group to say, hey, am I representing this character accurately? Would this person speak this way, right? So it's just, to me, would be helpful to have somebody give me their perspective. So going back to why my publisher decided to have only Latino writers write these books of Latino characters, Latino romances, I can only guess on why they were doing that. I don't really know why, but it could be that they didn't have enough Latino writers, and this was a perfect opportunity to bring in some Latino writers, right? To be more authentic. It could be that they felt that the Latino authors would be better able to represent their community, and they didn't want to have, since these were new books coming out, they didn't want to have a misrepresentation of the community, and maybe they decided this was the best way to do it. Let's just have people from the community write the books. So again, I'm just guessing. I really don't know why. And I, at the time, didn't really understand why people were so upset about that. I do understand writers can write any type of character, but why not let the community write the books that represent them the way they see their culture? And it's better for us to stand back as people who are not members of that group and observe and say, okay, what is important to them? What are they writing about? I do think today probably people would do a better job. I think we are more sensitive. I think we are, and this wasn't like ages and ages ago, but it was a long time ago. It was like 20 some years ago, right? So we get better. We get better every year, and we get more aware of how to be sensitive, to represent people accurately. And I think probably people would probably do a better job. Plus, we've had writers now. We've had people from the Latino community write books, and we've seen the type of books that they're writing and what's important to them. And I think that it would be probably maybe easier for somebody who is non-Latino to actually be able to write Latino characters, because they've seen an authentic portrayal of Latinos by the Latino community. So I think that, and and the same for African Americans. We've seen a lot of books written by African Americans, but a lot more than 20, 25 years ago. So now it gives us an opportunity as somebody who is not African American to maybe be able to create a character that sounds more authentic. We also have more writers to say, hey, can you look at this for me? Does this sound right? Am I portraying this character accurately? Is it offensive? Because that's not what I want to do. You have, I think, more opportunities now than probably 20, 25 years ago. So write diverse characters. I think it's great. It makes us it makes our books richer. It makes us learn more as writers. Just just do a little research, get a little feedback, and do your best job to portray other people the way that community, that group wants to be portrayed. And remember, it's mostly about your story. It's not about a culture. It's not about an ethnic group. It's about your story. It's about that one character that you're writing about. It's a main character, and he's going to go through the same arc and the same as anybody else. So focus on your story and just add the culture, whatever it is that you're adding, to make that person feel more real, more authentic, and that's it. Write a great story. If you found these few tips helpful, then please hit the share button, the subscribe button, and return next Friday for my next writing tips. And I hope to see you then.